okay, we're going to go north to Alaska. It's kind of unusual for a person to work in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, and then head for Anchorage, Alaska. When I was in Saudi Arabia, I played golf one day. It was 137 degrees. And in Saudi Arabia, you pick up a piece of AstroTurf about, 2x2, and you carry it with you. And you put your ball on it, so you're always hitting off grass because all the golf courses are sand. In Alaska one time, I was up in Nome and they were having a tournament there. It was 40 below zero and they were playing out on the bay. And what they did, this was January, at Christmas time, they took all the Christmas trees and they went out on the ice and they drilled holes and they made a 3-hole golf course out there. So they had a 3-hole golf tournament in January, 40 below zero. Not the best conditions to play golf in. When I got to Alaska Commercial, they were losing about $50,000 a year. And they were sponsoring all kind of events. We're all doing certain things, but they hired me as a merchandise manager. And as I went out to the stores, there were 28 of them, and I visited each store within 2 months. The board of directors back in Winnipeg thought that was quite ambitious to get out to see every store in 2 months, because you had to fly to every store. There was no road system that took you to any of our stores. So I was in an airplane an awful lot the first couple of months. But I found out many things. My first stop was Dillingham, which is a harbor that they do a lot of fishing out of. And the store there was not doing well. And when I got there, I was going through the general merchandise part of it, and that was my job. There was another vice president brought in by the name of Dick Hodge, and Dick Hodge was very, very well known in the food industry. He was an expert in food, and he really turned that side of the business around. But on my first visit to Dillingham, I walked into the thread department, and a lot of Native Alaskans, and you do not call them Eskimos, they're called Native Alaskans, But when I looked on the counter, what I didn't find was black and white thread. That's only about 80% of the thread business is black and white. And the same thing when I got to the yarn section. No black, no white. And white yarn is the #1 yarn. Probably about 60% of the sales is white or EQ yarn, but none of it. I got to the can opener section. Here we are in the middle of Alaska, no can openers. I said, where are the can? Oh, we didn't buy them. We forgot to buy them last week. Well, that's unacceptable. You've got to have the basic merchandise for the people. What we did have there, interesting enough, was $16,000 worth of Victoria's Secret bras and panties. Now, if you've ever been to Alaska and you be out in the remote villages, you don't see too many people that would wear that type of underwear. You'll see them in men's shirts and men's pants, and I don't know what they wear underneath, never asked, but I'm sure it isn't Victoria's Secret bras and panties. Come to find out later on, the buyer took kickbacks. In other words, they paid him extra money to buy that goods for each of our stores, and it was a huge amount of goods that he bought. You take 28 stores, and let's just say an average of $5,000. I mean, that's a lot of money in bras and panties that aren't going to sell. But we had all sorts of problems like that. Get into men's underwear and medium t-shirts are #1, no medium t-shirts. And as I went around the store, I kept finding things like this. And I asked the store manager, why? Why? Well, he said, oh, that's not important. We just got to have food. Well, it is important, because if a man comes in to buy a t-shirt and he can't buy it, he's going to go to the grocery store, two blocks down, he's going to buy his t-shirt there, and he's going to buy his groceries while he's there. And he's going to get fed up with not getting the basic goods from our store, and he's just going to go there all the time, the other store, and buy things. So it didn't take me long to figure out what the problem was in that company. And I remember when I got called into the, they called Dick and I to go to Winnipeg to meet with the board of directors after we were there about 3 months. They wanted to know what our impression of the stores were, how we were going to turn them around, how long it was going to take. And when they asked me, I said, well, they said, what is the biggest problem we've got in this company? I said, you've got 3 big problems. And they said, well, what are those? I said, communications, communications, communications. Again, when I got there in 1996, I believe it was, they lost $50,000. I'll tell you just so you can understand how the merchandising can make a difference in a company. When I left there, we were making $13 million a year, and we had sent $4 million in profit to the home company. So we went from losing $50,000 to making $17 million in a year, which you can tell is a great turnaround. Once we got the merchandise going in the right direction, the sales started coming. I took the buyers with me to Las Vegas. In Las Vegas, they have what they call a closeout show. And there you can find many great buys. And before I went back to my second board meeting, I wanted to take some of the buys that we had back with me. So I worked with the buyers buying different things. We bought some watches that had Nike, Reebok, Van Barn on them, just name brands that were cheap. And when I say cheap, these things cost us $2.35. They said, what are we going to sell these for? I said, $19.95. And the buyer says, you can't sell that for $19.95. I said, yeah, we can. We'll sell for $19.95. And then when we have our half price sale, we'll sell them for $9.95. It'll be a great buy at $9.95, right? And they said, yeah, well, it's half price. I said, but look at the profits you're going to make. So we also bought sunglasses with Reebok on them, Nike on them, other brand names on them. I bought 13,000 watches and 13,000 sunglasses. The profit on that paid my salary for the year. But there were many great buys that we picked up like that. We'd buy some really nice watches. I mean, good watches that people would wear every day. They cost us $49, and on the box it would say $289. That's what they're supposed to sell for. So if you sold them for 50%, at, just $99.99, the person looks at what they're supposed to sell for, and he thinks, "Wow, I'm getting a great buy." We'd usually buy probably 1,500 of those every time we'd go to that show. We could buy in the bush. You catch fish and you cook them in great big kettles. And I had that buyer with me, and I showed him some kettles, huge kettles, that he could buy for like $6.50, where he used to have to buy them for about $28. And he said, well, these are thin, they're not as good as, I said, it doesn't matter. They're gonna wear out and they'll just buy new ones. I mean, they're gonna work for 3-4 years for them. They'll be happy with that. So he said, okay, I'll try them. And that was one of our biggest sellers that we had for many years. Every year we'd go there, we'd buy some more of those pots and pans. And we could find all kinds of things at that closeout show. Then I'd take my clothing buyers to the clothing closeout show. Now they would have things 25% on the dollar. I remember buying some coats, and back in, probably about 98, 99, these puff jackets were really in style. Nordstrom's had them on sale for $300, $399. Well, when we got there, they had last year's colors. And last year's colors, we could buy them for $50. So remember, Nordstrom's are selling this jacket, same brand name, only different color, for $399 in Anchorage. I can sell them out in the bush and make 50% at $99.99. So we bought 300 of those and passed them out to the different stores, and they sold out in 3 weeks. But that's profit, and that's being merchants. That's finding what the customers want. Now, 3 months after we sold them, people come and say, hey, where are those? Get any more of those jackets? And no, that's a one-time buy. We're going to have lots of those. You're going to have to look for those when you come in. And if you see them, you're going to have to buy them. And that strategy came from my background with Costco, where they would bring certain items in, put them on an end cap, sell them out, and never have them again. You make the people want to buy them right then and right there. They're not going to say, well, I can get those in a week from now. Like a 24-inch television set, you can get them anytime you want them. But we had to have special items that we wanted the people to have to buy then. And those were items that we made great profit I remember going back for my second board meeting in Winnipeg, and we were sitting there in a big room, and the board of directors were sitting in front of us, and I was giving my little talk, and I brought the watches with me, and I brought some other gadgets with me that I'd bought that we were making money on. So I started throwing the watch out into the crowd to one of the board of directors, and I said, what would you pay for that? And he looked, oh, it's a Nike. Well, I'd give $29 for it. And I passed to the next one. Oh, yeah, he's probably right, $24, $29. I said, how much do you think those cost? And they said, oh, probably $19, $20. They cost $2.37, and they couldn't believe it that we could get buys like that. So after about 5 years of going to that and making all kind of profit, and I might say that our profit over the years went up every year. We had record earnings every year I was there. So the board of directors were quite interested because the division, the Canadian division, wasn't doing as well. They weren't keeping up with us. So finally, the Canadian general merchandise buyer decided that he would also go with us to these shows. And he was amazed at what he could buy, at what prices they could buy. So it was good for us because when we'd walk into a booth and they'd say, well, how many stores do you have? Well, the Canadians had, I can't remember right, but I think it was 237, and we had ours. So we'd say we have close to 300 stores. Everybody wanted to do business with you. And then the bigger you are, the better pricing you usually get. So it really helped both divisions understanding how to go to what shows and what to do. I'd go to Vegas 9 times a year on business just for buying trips with different buyers. It could be with the television buyers. We'd go to February with the television, radios, all that type of merchandise, and we'd buy. And I remember the first time we bought 2 containers of televisions. I thought the people over in Winnipeg were going to pass out when I told them I bought 2 container loads from one firm. They'd never heard anything like that. But when you buy that big of quantities, you get just such big discounts. Then you can really beat your competition. You know, the competition is out there selling a 24-inch television at that time at $399, and we're selling ours at $199. It's the same television. Doesn't take long for people to decide where they want to shop. So then you've got them coming for that. Again, they're going to buy other things. And they're going to say, well, that store's much cheaper. So you want to find those brand name items that you can really make money on. One of the ways we also make money it's called backdoor money. For example, Hallmark greeting cards. We were doing business with them, and I went to the buyer that bought the greeting cards, and I said, how much back money do you get? And he said, oh, I did really good last time. I got $25,000. I said, you get $25,000, we got 28 stores. I said, that's not very much. Oh, that's good. He said, that's good. I said, okay, well, when do we have another negotiation coming up? And he says, in a year. So I said, well, in a year, I'm going to do it. He said, no, that's my job. He actually argued with me, and I almost had to fire him over it. He was a young black man, and the same man that bought all the lingerie. He argued with me about buying the sunglasses, said it was a dumb move. We sold all 13,000 at probably close to a 70% profit on each one. So he really didn't know what he's talking about. But I ended up, in the long run, I'll go into that a little bit, but I ended up firing him. But anyway, we just would get there and just do crazy things, crazy buys, and make an awful lot of money off them. So it was a lot of fun too when we were doing that. Back to having to fire him, he happened to be a black man, not many in Alaska. He had been fired from 2 jobs before, and at each job he had sued the corporation for firing because he was black. And he was going to try that with me when I fired him. I had a stack about 4 inches high of reasons why I was firing him. During our talk, when I was going to let him go, he admitted that I was not racist. He said, I know you're doing this because of Winnipeg. I was not doing it because of Winnipeg. I was doing it because he just wasn't doing a good job. And he did sue us for $60,000. And the company said, just pay him and get rid of him. And I said, I don't want to do that. They said, do it. So I ended up giving him $60,000, and he got lost. Interesting enough, I coached high school basketball at the same time there. And he came to me because his son wanted to play high school basketball. He asked if I'd help his son out after he sued me for $60,000 and called me a racist. He had some guts on him. Anyway, then he went and he talked to 6 girls in our corporation, and he talked them into suing me for harassment in the workplace. And they were asking $1 million. And some of the things that I did wrong, I was so bad at. One time I walked over to a girl that was on the computer, and I put my arm on her shoulder to lean over to look in the computer because she was asking me some questions. She did not complain that I did anything wrong. It was a girl sitting behind her said, Mr. Bittner touched her on the shoulder, and that bothered me. And of course, the lawyer just shook his head. And then one of the other things was we were in a meeting, and he said, when Mr. Bittner got mad one time, he says, that's horsepucky. My lawyer looked at her and said, what should he said, horse shit? And these are the kind of things that they were coming up with for harassment in the workplace. One girl said, Mr. Bittner told a dirty joke in a meeting one time. And they asked the advertising man who was in that meeting, he said, do you remember when he told that dirty joke? And he says, I've never heard Mr. Bittner tell a dirty joke since he's been here. He says he's not that type of fella. He doesn't tell dirty jokes. So they knew it was a trumped up charge. When I went in before the court sees it, you get to talk to another judge who will look it over to see if there's any cause really to be a trial. And when I got in her office, she says, Mr. Bittner, in her office, she said, Mr. Bittner, I've read the transcripts on this. She says, you have done nothing wrong. She says, there's more bad things said in my chambers than you said in your company, but you're going to lose. I said, what do you mean? She said, those women are going to get up in front, and they're not really peers. They're maybe their peers, but they're not your peers. You're a huge company. You're a gentleman that makes good money. They're just poor little girls that work for you, and they're beaten down, and you're making all the money, and they're doing all the work. But let me talk to them, see if I can't get this a little bit right. So she went in and talked to him, and she come back in and she was smiling. And I said, what's going on? She said, well, that was the first talk. They're now down to 500,000. So she got it cut in half. She said, but we're not done. She did this 3 times. Finally, on the 3rd one, she said, I told them point blank that if they took this to court, that I personally would show up at court and be one of your witnesses, that this is not right. And I told the presiding judge that, and he agreed with me. So what they're going to do is they're going to ask for $60,000, and I would suggest you pay it. They owe their lawyer $120,000, so they're going to lose money on this deal. That's how it went down. So there, the jury or the judicial system really paid off for us and worked out well. Most of those people ended up going and working for the previous president of the company, who was starting his own distributorship for the stores, for different stores in Alaska. They lasted 1 year before they went out of business. They didn't have much of a chance. So it wasn't fun though, it's never fun to be called a racist. It's never fun to have people call you mean-spirited, mean, talk dirty, whatever. But that's part of the business world that you got to get into, and you got to understand that. It didn't bother me as much as probably it should have bothered me, because I knew I was in the right on that. As we went along, we become really well known for what we were doing in the community. The Girl Scouts came to me and asked me to come to a meeting one time, and they were telling it they were trying to start troops all over Alaska. And they said, wonder if your company could help us maybe with some money, maybe like $5,000 to kind of get maybe a couple of troops started in the thing. And I said, no, we can't do it. We'll give you $50,000, we'll give you $10,000 a year for the next 5 years, so you can really get those troops. We were making a tremendous amount of profit. Why shouldn't we put it back out in the community and help the people that are helping us at doing our job? At that time, I had some people come to me and wonder if I'd be interested in running for a political office, and that political office was governor. And I said, no, I'm not a politician, and I really don't. My wife at that time had moved back to Idaho, and I wanted to live with her, and she didn't want to live in Alaska, so it wasn't going to work out. But it would have been interesting. I would have got to run against Sarah Paulin, and I really haven't. I think I would have had a pretty good chance of beating Sarah Paulin. I was better well known than she was. I had facts to back out what we did there at Alaska Commercial Company. I had the overall business knowledge of traveling around the world and doing different things. So I think it would have been an interesting contest, but it wasn't for me. I loved Alaska. Anchorage was a beautiful city, great places to eat, things to do. Never once did I regret ever being in Alaska. One of the interesting things that happened, the Russians sent over 2 young ladies to be interns in my organization. They wanted to learn American business. I got to spend time with them. One of them was pregnant at the time she was there, and when she went back home, she had her baby on my birthday. So we have stayed friends for 22 years now. In fact, as I'm recording this, she's here with us, her and her daughter, who is like another daughter to me. She actually calls me dad, and I call her daughter at times. And that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have been up in Alaska. So I get to hear all the sides of Russia, and she gets to hear all the sides of America. But you know, we decided, the 3 of us, that we were never going to fight over who's right and who's wrong, if Russia's right or America's right. We were going to start just between us to be friends. And you know, I think if that happened all over the world, I think it's be a better place. Sorry, didn't mean to get teary-eyed. I got to coach basketball there. The company thought it was great that I coached, so I had a ball. I not only got to coach basketball, I got to be the color person on television during the state tournaments. That's the person that describes what's going on during the game. I did that for 4 years at the biggest channel there in Anchorage. It's the only one that carried the state tournament. I got to be on the state basketball board, which was great. Got to do advertisements for banks. I got to do advertisement for the college there. So, you know, it was interesting. Here's a boy from Michigan doing some big stuff up in Alaska. Sometimes the good Lord is good. The Canadian corporation was just fantastic with me. Every time I'd go to Canada, I mean, those people in every office would come out and give me a hug and say, hey, thank you for turning that company around. And that's another funny story I forgot. When Dick and I went the first time to Alaska, or to Winnipeg for the board meeting, the hockey team, the Winnipeg Jets, were playing their final game on the hockey league, and they're going to move to Phoenix the next year. And they're actually playing the Detroit Red Wings, which is my favorite team. So one of the people asked me if we'd like to go to the hockey game that night. And I said, yeah, I'd like to go. And Dick said, yeah, I'd like to go to the hockey game. So they gave us tickets, and I found out later that the company had a block of tickets. And there were certain seats that were just for the Northwest Company, is what it was called. The old Hudson Bay Company, by the way. So we went to the hockey arena, and we found our seats where they're at. And we were walking up to our seats, and we kind of found them, and we're sitting down, and the guy come walking up to us. These are for people from the Northwest Company. Oh, I said, oh, I see. And as this guy was kind of talking to us, explaining who the Northwest Company was. We were playing dumb. I heard one of the other guys, who I later found out was the pilot of the plane we always flew in, he was telling people, well, they got those 2 bastards from Anchorage up here, so they better be turning that company around, or we're going to take those bastards out and shoot them. So a couple more people come down then, including this pilot. And he said, who are you people? He wasn't a nice guy at the time. I said, well, we're those 2 bastards from Anchorage. And we had a little bit of laugh about that. And when they threw a party for me, a going away party when I retired, I told that story, and that pilot was there, and he was chuckling. He thought it was quite funny because he remembered what he had said. And I have to say one thing for Canadian: when you retire, they take care of you. They give me a beautiful marble stone not marble stone, sandstone figurine that cost $16,000. They give me fur beaver hats. They give me a book that everybody in the Winnipeg office signed and wrote a little note to me. I mean, it was just unbelievable. The tears were running, I will tell you. They also, at the board meeting, had me stand up and for applause. And the people were just very appreciative of what we ended up doing there. Sometimes I feel bad. I think I got a little more praise than I should have got. Dick didn't get as much as he should have got, probably, because Dick was a tremendously big part of our success also. And we had other people like Rex Wilhelm, who took my place. When I left, I had hired 4 young men. Rex was already there, but Bosco, Baldwin was his last name. He was 24 years old, and my personnel manager died, a man that had been there for years. And I went to Bosco and I said, Bosco, you're the new vice president of personnel. He said, whoa, I can't do this. And he just turned out to be a fantastic personnel man. He was the top personnel man in the state of Alaska. By the time I had left, I promoted a young man by the name of Ben Pyatt. All Ben knew how to do his work, and he was also very intelligent. Didn't have a college degree. Rex had a bachelor's degree. So did Bosco. Ben was like me. We just had not much of degrees, but we knew how to work hard and we're pretty bright. And I hired another young man to be head of a district manager for stores, Walt Pickett. Walt Pickett was probably the smartest of all of us. He had a master's degree and just a brilliant young man. So I had 4 young men that were much more intelligent than me that were helping me run that corporation. That didn't get a whole lot credit. I did give them credit. Edward Kennedy, who is the CEO of the Northwest Company, did say that one of my strongest attributes was to give credit to other people. Even though I did it, I still give credit to other people, and there was no reason for me not to. I'd made my mark. I wanted to see them make theirs. They're all very, very successful businessmen today. Rex ran the company for about 10 years after I left and did a phenomenal job. One of our lucky things that happened, we had a meat processing plant that did 60,000 pounds of meat a week, and that was sent to our stores and to other stores. And we were losing money there. We were losing quite a bit of money when I got there, but the man that was running it decided to go out on his own, thank goodness, and I got to hire a guy named Gary Wills, and Gary was just, in the meat business, he was just unbelievable. He's from Texas, and he knew every butcher, I think, in the world. But we had, I think, 6 butchers and him, and he just turned that department around. Within 2 years, he was making $1 million profit just out of the meat division alone. There was a man named Bob Gelisich that was in the food department. We also had a wholesale division for 360 mom and pop stores. And I put Bob Gelisich in charge of that, and Bob just did a great job there. I was just fortunate that I had great people around me. It was pretty easy to turn that company around with that kind of brain power. So I'd say that, it capped my career off real well. It set me up for retirement. When I went there, when I first interviewed, they asked me if I'd like more pay up front in my salary or would I like it in bonus. And if I took it in bonus, I would make a lot more money in the long run if we did well. Well, when you go from losing $50,000 a year to making really $17 million a year, you can imagine what my bonuses were. And they were tremendous bonuses. I was probably the second highest paid person in the state of Alaska. The other one would be the president of BP, the big oil company. So I left there a very happy person and just made great friends. It was a tremendous experience. But one more thing I'd like to say, what was interesting to me, again, when I first went and asked Sheikh Abdullah El Hamrani why he hired me. And he said, well, Jerry, we can see you're a teacher, you're a coach. In Saudi Arabia, someday is going to run out of oil. And we need people that know how to run businesses and understand profit and loss. And you're a teacher. You can do that for us. And that's why we hired you over all the other applicants that we looked at. So I asked Edward Kennedy after I was there, about a year, I said, Edward, why did you end up hiring me? He says, you know, Jerry, someday in Alaska, it's going to run out of oil. And the people are going to have to know how to run businesses. They're going to have to be merchants. They're going to have to be different business people. You're a teacher, you're a coach. We need people like you.